If you've been rocking with me for a while, you've likely seen King Brizzy, as he and I were both at the same prison at the same time, but we didn't know each other. While in confinement, which is the prison within the prison, I heard Brizzy rapping and singing from behind his cell door. The whole dorm was quiet from start to finish, and I immediately knew he had talent. But that one time was the only time we'd be around each other until years later. A mutual friend named Brando would connect us while Brizzy was still in prison. Brando, along with a few others I'd been in prison with, would all vouch for Brizzy as not only being on that, but being a genuine good person. I'd hear his story, how while in prison, Brizzy's little brother was murdered. Brizzy would be released, and shortly after, he'd be arrested for murder, charged with killing his brother's alleged killer. The news would paint a story of revenge, and the story would get even crazier when all charges against Brizzy were dropped due to lack of evidence.
A Fort Myers man accused of murdering a father in South Lee County back in May is now back on our streets. Abraham Rivera was released from jail this week. He was initially charged with second-degree murder, accused of shooting and killing Eddie Powell Jr. at the Island Park Shopping Center off of 41. Investigators painted the act as a form of vengeance following an ongoing dispute between the two. We are still working to find out why the case against Rivera was dropped.
I wasn't even thinking of YouTube at the time. This was something out of a movie, or something that should become one. This was the life story every rapper wished they had, and everyone in Brizzy's circle knew the potential he had. Back in 2020, I dropped a 19-minute video on Brizzy, his music, and his story. To be in prison and hear your life story was being shared and you were amassing new fans, to hear your channel hit 1,000 subscribers in only a few hours, it must have been pure motivation for him to get out and take off in the music industry. He'd message me on JPay, a prison email system, showing appreciation, and me and Brizzy would establish our own friendship as time went on. I'd communicate with his mother as she ran his social media while he was incarcerated, and 6 months after the first video, I'd make an update after his mom told me he was stabbed 15 times. The video would keep his name ringing, and not long after, I thought I'd send him a surprise. Back in 2020, you could pay no jumper $85 to listen and review your music, so I decided to send him Brizzy's song from prison, Silent Treatment. House Phone and Cam Girl would love the song, and I'd send the clip over to Brizzy's mom so she could tell Brizzy they just played his song on one of the biggest hip-hop channels on YouTube. Like I said, me and him never officially met, and he'd always show appreciation for what I was doing for him, but his affiliation would later cause conflict. King Brizzy was a self-admitted, documented member of the Latin Kings. It was easy to see some of the people in his group wanted to reap the benefits of his talents, and because he was king, they felt as if they deserved to be the only ones he collabed with. This would lead to a failed prison YouTuber named King Domi. Domi would claim nobody knows Brizzy how he knows Brizzy, and that I was just trying to use his name for views, the same views that he wanted. What Domi's dumbass failed to realize was it was Brizzy himself who wanted to be on my platform, and the only reason I even did it was as a favor to our mutual friend. But in my eyes, if Domi's a king, he's a reflection of Brizzy. And if Brizzy can't get him to shut the fuck up, then Queen Domi will be the reason it all falls apart. So I took Brizzy's videos down. It wasn't until later speaking with Brizzy when he said fuck Domi, he doesn't even fuck with him. And as time went on, I'd eventually put the videos back up. Domi would fade himself out after being exposed for multiple things like kidnapping his own girlfriend and kid, and stealing money from the same king that made him a king while that king was in jail because Domi was homeless. But back to the main story. Me and Brizzy would be back on good terms after it was clear he was doing his own thing and his affiliation wasn't playing a part in his soon-to-be career. Brizzy wouldn't be released until October of 2022, and 3 months later, we'd meet up for the first time. Both Brizzy and Brando would fly up to Boston when we hit the club and casino. It was often asked of me to manage Brizzy, start a record company, etc., but it wasn't something I wanted to do or something I felt like I had the time to invest in. What I did say is I'll put him on however I can. Brizzy and Brando both offered money on multiple occasions for me to post him, but I never took it. I never actually profited off anything aside from the videos that I created, and I took pride in that. It's often asked what positive things I do with my platform, and to me, this was one. Finding someone in prison with talent and helping them find success. Smaller channels all wanted to interview Brizzy, knowing it wouldn't be long before he blew, but I told him don't do it. The biggest mistake I saw people make was jumping on every channel they can, repeating the same story instead of waiting. I only did an interview with Lockdown 23-1. My next interview would be years later on No Jumper, and in a day, it hit 1 million views. That interview currently sits at 6.5 million and is one of No Jumper's biggest interviews in recent years. So I gave Brizzy advice and he took it. That, and I had also already put him in contact with Adam22 to get him a No Jumper interview. But before the interview would take place, Brizzy was back in jail. He'd be charged with trafficking cocaine and fentanyl, along with weed and paraphernalia, after being pulled over in a car with 3 other people. Allegedly, the person who the drugs belonged to threw them in the back seat where Brizzy sat after being pulled over. From what I heard, the charges against Brizzy would be dropped when the person who actually owned the drugs stepped up and claimed them. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. While in jail, Brizzy would be rearrested for punching someone in the face, resulting in dude's teeth being pushed back into his mouth. Brizzy would end up serving a year in county over this incident. Once back out, I had an interview with DJ Academics planned, and I invited Brizzy knowing it would be a good look for him to get next to Academics. Brando, Brizzy, and 2 of Brizzy's people would come to Brooklyn, where we'd run into Tony Yayo at a hotel. Brizzy would meet Academics, and we'd hit Starlets where I lied to the club, saying he was my artist just to get him in the picture with me that they wanted to put on the celebrity wall. I took Brando's word that Brizzy was good people, and this being the second time we'd met, I agreed, so I was willing to put him on off the strength. For the second time, I tried to set him up with a No Jumper interview. Adam would agree, and dates were set, but yet again, Brizzy would be back in jail, and I'd have to let No Jumper know for the second time it had to be canceled. At this point, he was fucking my face up, and the reason he was back in jail? Apparently, he went to an Airbnb with some females who didn't even rent the Airbnb, but broke into the lockbox and got the keys, so they all ended up charged with burglary. I'd speak with Brando telling him I fuck with Brizzy, but I'm gonna cut ties as far as business goes, as he didn't seem to be taking anything serious. He'd say he appreciated everything I've done, but actions speak louder than words, and he'd keep getting arrested for dumb shit. The exact reason I didn't want to manage him in the first place, it would have been a financial loss. Brizzy would once again be freed, so we said fuck it. After 2 failed attempts to get him on No Jumper, I'm gonna interview him and bring him on my platform. This wasn't my first interview, as I did Zoom interviews in the past, but this was the first high quality interview after passing 1 million subscribers. Me and Brando both knew it needed to be done quick because, as history shows, Brizzy most likely wasn't going to last 6 months without finding himself in a cell. So Brizzy and Brando came back to Boston, we got the interview done, they went back to Florida, and the views were going up. This was pretty much Brizzy's first and biggest interview. Things were looking great, he'd continue to drop music, and more importantly, continue to stay free. 2 months would pass when mass rapper Millie's told me he'd be in St. Pete. I'd sent Millie's Brizzy's music before, and Millie said he was down to do a song, so I hit up Brizzy and told him to come with me. Brizzy would bring Kodak's cousin G1, who I also spoke with about possibly interviewing, and Brizzy and Millie's would speak in person on getting a song done. See, to me, we were just hanging out and networking, which is key to the business. I was the one getting Brizzy into the right rooms, and all of this was done off the strength. We'd known each other for 4 years at this point, but this was only our 4th time linking up in person, and unexpectedly, everything was about to change. The DMs started coming in, then the comments. Paperwork had made its way to YouTube alleging Brizzy snitched in not one, but 2 cases. I'd call him asking if he'd seen it before getting off the phone and sending him the link. He'd laugh it off saying he'd put me in contact with his co-defendants, but I told him go live and explain it instead. I'd keep telling him to confront the situation, but he'd say he'd clear it up at a later time. He wanted to have his co-defendants present to apparently kill everything at once, so I asked him, is the paperwork real? Because if it is, they ain't gonna give a fuck about what the co-defendants say. The paperwork would state back in 2011, a home invasion took place. Officers would locate 3 juveniles, one of which was a then 15-year-old Brizzy, and the other a 15-year-old named Johnny Ward. Brizzy and Ward would be identified by witnesses and taken into custody, while the 3rd juvenile was released. At the Fort Myers Police Department, both Brizzy and Ward would be interviewed, and post-Miranda, Ward would state that he, Brizzy, and 2 others went to the home of a weed dealer to steal his weed and money. Ward told investigators Brizzy went to the door and made contact with the victim. He said the other 2 and himself stood as lookouts until Brizzy came back out with the victim's property. So at this point, Ward not only admitted to the plan, he said everyone played a role, but mainly placed the blame on Brizzy as being the one who actually did the home invasion. Brizzy would be interviewed by investigators next. Brizzy would state he was at Ward's house with 3 others. He advised Ward said let's do this, and they went to the victim's house. He advised he rushed the victim with another person, but said he didn't have a gun and only told the victim he did. Brizzy then advised everyone went inside the house and took the victim's property. So while Ward only said Brizzy did the home invasion, Brizzy said they all did. Looking back at the victim's report, the victim stated a masked Hispanic pointed a gun at him demanding money when 3 others came into the house. So it would seem Ward lied to police to protect himself and blamed Brizzy, while Brizzy told the truth and said everyone did it. Both Ward and Brizzy named Braha Fields and Kiera Florence in their interviews. Fields had been released because the victims didn't recognize him, and Kiera had temporarily got away. But with Ward and Brizzy's statements naming Kiera's picture would later be shown to the victim days later, where he confirmed she was one of the 4 that he saw inside of his house, and because of that, she'd later be arrested. Ward would be sentenced to 3 years in prison, Brizzy would be sentenced to 4, but Kiera would get it the worst. As part of Brizzy's plea deal, Brizzy would agree to testify truthfully and consistently with the proffer he gave against Kiera. Now, a proffer is a sit-down meeting between the defendant, his attorney, and the state. So in this case, Brizzy sat down with the state and gave evidence against Kiera in return for a lesser sentence. What's crazy is my co-defendant did the same thing. He gave a proffer against me and got lesser time. I got a letter while in confinement at the county jail stating my co-defendant was now a state witness, and Kiera would receive the same letter stating Brizzy was a state witness against her. She'd eventually be sentenced to 6 years and 3 months in state prison, as she was 18 at the time of the home invasion, while Brizzy and Ward were 15. But this was just the first case. A second case would state that after Brizzy was released from prison in 2015, he was riding passenger in a vehicle that was pulled over. A firearm was found, along with marijuana, so Brizzy and the female driver were handcuffed and read their rights. Both agreed to speak, and Brizzy would state the firearm was not his, it was the female's. He advised he understood why the vehicle was stopped and that he was not wearing his seatbelt. He also stated he had just got into the vehicle a few minutes prior and he noticed the vehicle smelled like marijuana. While at the jail, Brizzy advised the detective the firearm was behind the driver's seat, implying it was behind the female driver. When asked if his DNA would be on the firearm, Brizzy would say he wasn't sure. The female would also speak with officers saying she was unaware that the firearm and marijuana was in the vehicle. She stated that she believes they weren't in the vehicle until she gave Brizzy a ride to the store, and she didn't smell marijuana prior to him getting in the car. When asked what Brizzy was doing when they were pulled over, she'd say she was concentrating on driving and didn't see. Now, like I said, I texted Brizzy asking if the paperwork was real, and the next day he'd call me saying it was, with his own explanation. But I didn't want to hear it, because a phone call with me meant nothing. The narrative was less about him snitching and more about me being the so-called king of paperwork. It would be alleged that I must have known about his cases and covered it up for him, that I was selective politicking, and that I must have known he snitched, but because we were friends, I didn't expose him. On June 8th, Brizzy would FaceTime me with his co-defendants. He'd show me him with them, and Ward would take the phone saying the whole thing was being made into something it wasn't, and saying he wanted Brizzy to tell investigators there wasn't a gun. But I'm guessing Ward didn't know I saw the paperwork, where Ward clearly tried to blame everything on Brizzy. Kiera would then speak, and the first thing she said to me was, "When Brizzy snitched on me, I don't even consider that snitching. It was so long ago, and everyone was young." Now that right there was crazy as hell to hear, because she really wasn't helping his case at all. She'd continue on saying she was the one that had them in the streets, but like I said before, it didn't really matter what they said because the paperwork said enough. I'd end up repeating what I originally told Brizzy to them. Telling me about y'all's case is nothing because I'm not Brizzy's lawyer. I'm not here to defend him. The best thing y'all can do is make a video explaining y'all's side. I already told Brizzy I wouldn't be using my platform to defend him because it was on him to explain it. I told him me giving him the luxury of using my platform would be biased, and if I gave him that opportunity, I'd have to give it to every other rapper I've exposed. The next day, I'd ask him if he was going to make a video clearing the air. He said he would, but he was still waiting on his co-defendants to make a video. He'd send me a video of Ward explaining things and keep texting me. And I'd tell Brizzy he really just needs to address it, and he'd swear he would. I'd send him 4 videos people made alleging I covered his case up, and yet again he'd say he was making a video to clear up everything, but it would take a week. I'd tell him that's a long ass time to wait, and there's no point in waiting because whoever was looking into him most likely already requested his interrogation, body cam, proffer, and whatever else they can get. I'd tell him the video he was waiting to make was for him and that I want my name cleared. At this point, I wasn't trying to read everything he was saying. He'd say he'd send me a video, and I told him don't send it to me, post it. To me, it seemed like he was avoiding addressing the allegations because he knew he fucked up. He'd even spoke to a friend of mine saying he felt like these things would eventually be brought up, which was crazy for me to hear because he knows who I am. He knows what I do, and he never told me about it until after it was exposed. But what bothers me most is a week would pass and Brizzy still hadn't addressed it. Brizzy still hadn't cleared my name. This video was a clear reflection of everything I did for him, everything I put him onto, and everything that could have been. So to realize he wouldn't clear my name because he didn't want to publicly accept his paperwork, it was disappointing. Because out of everything I could have charged him for, I felt like he at least owed me that. I told him I wouldn't be making a video on what took place, but he needed to address it. And now here I am making the video, because at the end of the day, I have my own name to defend along with my own brand. So ties between me and Brizzy are officially cut. And once again, the rumors that they tried to put against me are shot down. I was making videos about Brizzy within a year of starting my channel. It wouldn't transfer over to covering rappers' paperwork until another year after. I never had a reason to look into his old cases aside from the murder, and the majority of rappers I've exposed for snitching were exposed by someone within their own city who then sent the paperwork to me. My platform just brought it to light. But at the end of the day, people who don't like me or the success I've found will say whatever they can against me until the day that they die, because there's not much else that they can do. So now they want to look into everyone around me and try to come up with a conspiracy that can be used against me. But hey, it's 1090 Jake. I'm rocking with y'all like y'all rocking with me. Till next time.